You might assume a good single-player game guarantees high sales, but the industry rarely works like that. Games like Prey and Sleeping Dogs are highly regarded today, yet they completely bombed at the cash register during launch. Bad release timing, confusing marketing, or bloated budgets usually doom these projects before they ever have a chance. I want to talk about why a handful of really well-made single-player games flopped financially, and why they are still worth your time. One of these actually won multiple awards the exact same week its publisher wrote it off as a total loss. Beyond Good and Evil. When this dropped back in 2003, it was directed by Michel Ancel, the guy who created Rayman, and it had all the makings of a massive hit, but Ubisoft just completely fumbled the bag on the marketing. They released it right in the middle of this incredibly crowded holiday season, practically competing against their own massive release, Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. Nobody really knew what Beyond Good and Evil actually was based on the box art, so nobody bought it. It was a massive commercial failure at launch, which is totally wild because this is just a good-ass game. You play as Jade. She's a freelance photojournalist, she knows martial arts, and she runs an orphanage on this beautiful water-covered planet called Hillis, with her adoptive uncle, Paige. And Paige is a giant, walking, talking pig who is also a mechanic. It is a pretty simple setup, but the world building immediately pulls you in. The planet is constantly under attack by these weird alien creatures called the Domzi, and the military force that is supposed to be protecting the citizens, the Alpha sections, is acting super sketchy. So Jade shuts off her normal routine and gets recruited by an underground resistance network to basically expose the truth using her camera. The game is straight up this crazy melting pot of different genres, but it all comes together so well. The photography is the stuff that always really calls to me. You are actively cataloging the wildlife of Hillis to fund your adventure. You see a weird glowing frog or a massive flying manta ray, you pull out your camera, snap a pic, and a scientific research facility pays you for it. It gives you a real reason to actually look around and pay attention to the environment. Then, because Hillis is mostly water, you get around in this beat-up hovercraft. You can buy upgrades for it from this rhinoceros-run garage, enter races, fight giant sea monsters, and just cruise around. It makes the world feel so connected. And when you are on foot, you are sneaking through these heavily guarded military facilities, solving environmental puzzles and getting into light, flowy combat using Jade's Daijo staff. Alpha Protocol. Now that's one of those games that had all the right ideas but just got buried under jank and bad timing. So this came out in 2010, made by Obsidian, same devs behind stuff like Fallout New Vegas and KOTOR 2. So you know the writing was gonna go hard, and it did. Like, this isn't your usual spy shooter, this was a full-on spy RPG with branching dialogue, actual choices that change how the story plays out, and a lead character, Mike Thornton, who you could shape into a charming James Bond type, a violent loose cannon, or even quiet professional. What really made it stand out was how alive the dialogue system felt. It didn't use typical RPG dialogue wheels. Instead, you picked your attitude, suave, aggressive, professional, and you had to do it in real time, like a conversation was actually happening. No sitting there for 2 minutes reading every option. You had to go with your gut, and depending on what kind of personality you leaned into, people would like you more or hate your guts. Some allies could even become enemies later on, depending on how you handled them. That kind of system, barely any games even try that today. The missions took you across the world, Saudi Arabia, Moscow, Rome, Taipei, with sneaky spy gadgets, branching paths, and multiple ways to complete objectives. You could go full stealth, hack computers, talk your way in, or just go loud with guns blazing, and each approach would affect how people viewed you and what intel you got for future missions. It really nailed that you're a spy in over your head feeling. But here's the sad part, the gameplay just couldn't keep up, the shooting was clunky, the cover system was janky, and the stealth was, not broken, just not good. Ads of rough animations, average graphics, and bad marketing, and yeah, Alpha Protocol never stood a chance. Critics tore it apart for not being polished, and players mostly skipped it. But dude, under all that mess, it was a seriously smart, bold, and different RPG. It took the spy genre and actually made it into a real RPG with choice and consequence. It had guts. No other game really does what it did, even now, especially with how reactive it is. You could play it 3 times and have wildly different outcomes depending on who you trust, who you piss off, and how you handle situations.
No. No. Sorry. Radio went on.
Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. When it dropped back in 2021, developed by Eidos Montreal, it was dead on arrival for so many people, and it honestly failed to meet Square Enix's launch sales expectations. During their financial briefings, Square Enix flat out admitted that the initial sales undershot what they were hoping for, and we all know exactly why it happened. It had the massive, dark cloud of the Marvel's Avengers game hanging right over its head. Everyone looked at this and thought, oh great, another broken live service game, full of microtransactions. But that was the craziest part. Guardians was strictly a single-player game, with absolutely zero downloadable content and zero microtransactions. It was just a complete, linear, story-driven action-adventure.
How you doing, buddy?
And the story? It is fantastic. The game actually ended up winning Best Narrative at the Game Awards in 2021. The writing is top-notch, and it really keeps you interested all the way through the campaign. You play as Peter Quill, and you are constantly making choices, interacting with the crew, and just listening to them talk. The dialogue and the constant bickering back and forth are exactly what make these characters so good. It really feels like you are hanging out with the Guardians on this crazy space road trip. Plus, the soundtrack is just insanely good, winning awards for its music and having a killer licensed tracklist. Now, the gameplay and the combat definitely drew some mixed reactions from critics and players. I will totally admit that the combat can get a little stale or tiresome toward the end of the game. You are mostly holding down the fire button as Star-Lord, while directing the rest of the team to do their special moves. But the game gives you these awesome accessibility options to set a custom difficulty scale, which lets you just breeze through the fights and enjoy the incredible story. It really sucks that it took so long for people to realize how good this was. Square Enix had to rely on heavy discounts and sales initiatives kicking off in November 2021 just to try and make up for the slow start. It did eventually get a second wind and reached over 8 million players, mostly because it got tossed onto Xbox Game Pass and PlayStation Plus. But man, as a launch title, it totally underperformed. Prey, 2017. So, Prey is one of those games that a lot of people skipped. It came out in 2017, and yeah, it kind of flopped. Like, not many folks talked about it, and even less actually played it, but man, they missed out big time. This game is crazy good. It's one of those smart sci-fi games where you really gotta use your brain, but it's also super fun and creepy in a cool way. You play as this character named Morgan Yu. You wake up on this giant space station called Talos, and guess what? The station's a mess. Something went really wrong. There's these creepy black alien things called Typhon running around. They don't talk, they just shapeshift and attack you. Some of them can even pretend to be stuff like coffee cups or chairs, and then boom, they jump at your face. It's wild, keeps you on your toes the whole time. But here's what makes Prey awesome. It's not just about shooting aliens, it's about exploring, solving problems, making choices, like real choices. You can sneak, you can fight, or even use weird alien powers you find. There's no one right way to do stuff. The game lets you be creative. You find different paths, hack doors, climb vents, or even glue things together to make your own way. It makes you feel smart, like a space detective or something. The space station is super detailed too. Every room feels lived in. You find notes, emails, stuff from the people who used to live there. You start to piece together what happened. It's like reading a sci-fi book while also fighting monsters. The story's deep too. It messes with your head. There are questions about who you really are, what the Typhon really want, and if you're even making the right choices. Some of the twists are super shocking. You might finish the game and still be thinking about it for days. A sad thing is this game didn't sell well, even though it was made by a great studio and had amazing ideas. It just kind of got ignored. Maybe the trailers didn't show how cool it was, or maybe people just weren't in the mood for a slow burn space game at the time. But now, years later, more and more folks are going back and realizing how special Prey really is. It's a hidden gem. If you like smart games with deep stories, cool powers, and creepy aliens, this is for you. It may have flopped when it came out, but honestly, it's a masterpiece in disguise. You just gotta give it a chance. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. So, looking at Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, this is one of those situations that honestly just bums me out, because the game we got is straight up fantastic, but the commercial reality of it is super depressing. We haven't had a proper original Prince of Persia game in forever. People were begging for Sands of Time to come back, and instead, Ubisoft reveals this 2D Metroidvania with a completely new main character, Sargon, and a wildly different vibe in the initial trailers. A lot of people wrote it off immediately, but I grabbed it because I love this genre, and man, I was completely blown away. The movement in this game is incredibly fluid. You start off just running and jumping, but eventually you're stringing together these massive, screen-wide acrobatics, bouncing off walls, dashing through midair, and using time powers to teleport back to a shadow clone of yourself to solve crazy platforming rooms. The combat is surprisingly deep too. It has this really satisfying parry system, where if you time it right on certain heavy attacks, you get this super cinematic, flashy animation that just wrecks the enemy. It feels awesome every single time. And they actually solved one of the biggest headaches in the entire Metroidvania genre. You know when you find a door or ledge you can't reach, and you have to try and remember it for 6 hours later when you finally get the double jump? In The Lost Crown, you click a button, it takes a screenshot of exactly where you are, and pins that picture right to your map. It is such a brilliant quality of life feature. But despite doing pretty much everything right mechanically, it just totally flatlined at retail. It supposedly only moved around 1 million or so copies in its first couple of months, which for a massive AAA publisher like Ubisoft is basically a massive failure. And I really think it comes down to a few bizarre decisions from the top. First off, they priced it at $50. For a side-scrolling platformer in a market where stuff like Hollow Knight exists for $15, that is a really tough sell for the casual audience. On top of that, they didn't put it on Steam at launch. They kept it locked to the Epic Game Store and Ubisoft Connect, which just totally killed a lot of that natural PC word of mouth. And honestly, it suffers from the Ubisoft curse. Everybody knows that if you wait 4 weeks, a Ubisoft game is going to be heavily discounted, so nobody felt the urgency to show up on day one. The fallout from it is just a huge bummer. The development team at Montpellier, who clearly poured their souls into making this tight, responsive, beautifully designed game, basically got broken up and shuffled onto other projects after the DLC came out. They apparently pitched a sequel, and executives completely shot it down. It's incredibly frustrating, because this wasn't some broken, buggy mess. The Lost Crown is really one of the most polished, fun action platformers I've played in years, and it just got left out in the cold.
I will fulfill my destiny and save the kingdom.
Spec Ops: The Line. Okay, so this one's called Spec Ops: The Line, and yeah, at first it just looks like a regular army game. Like, you see the cover, you see the name, and you're probably thinking, oh, it's just one of those boring military shooters, but man, this one is different. Like, really different. It tricks you. It starts off normal, then slowly turns into something way deeper and kind of dark, but in a good way. You play as the soldier named Walker. He's leading a small team into this city called Dubai, but it's not the normal Dubai we know. This place is destroyed. Sand everywhere, buildings falling apart. It looks like a war zone mixed with a sandstorm nightmare, and you're there to find another soldier who went missing. Sounds simple, right? But the more you play, the more messed up things get. At first, you think you're the hero, you think you're doing the right thing, but then the game starts showing you stuff that makes you stop and think, like, wait, are we the good guys? And that feeling just keeps growing. There's this one moment, it's really heavy, like, I won't spoil it, but it hits you hard. Makes your stomach feel weird. It's not about jumping and shooting anymore, it's about choices, regret, guilt, stuff you don't usually feel in a game like this.
I'm gonna kill every last one of you.
And what's crazy is most people missed it. When this game came out, it didn't sell much. Barely anyone talked about it. They thought it was just another army shooter. But the truth is, this game has one of the smartest stories ever put into a shooter. No joke. It's not just about action. It's about what war does to people. Like, really shows the human side of it. Even the ending messes with your brain. You finish the game and just kind of sit there quiet thinking about everything you did. It's not fun in the yay let's play again kind of way. It's more like, wow, what did I just go through? The gameplay is pretty standard. Shoot, take cover, move forward. But the way the game tells its story and how it makes you feel, that's where it shines. The city looks amazing too, like all the sand and broken glass and orange skies. It's creepy and beautiful at the same time. But yeah, Spec Ops The Line didn't sell a lot. It flopped when it launched, but people who did play it still talk about it today because it's not just a game, it's an experience, a masterpiece hiding in plain sight. Quantum Break. When you talk about big, weird swings in the gaming industry, you absolutely have to talk about this one. Remedy Entertainment, the studio behind Max Payne and Alan Wake, partnered up with Microsoft back in 2016 to make this massive Xbox One exclusive, but the marketing was totally confusing. Microsoft pushed it as this bizarre hybrid between a video game and a high-budget live-action television show. People didn't really know what to make of it. Plus, the Xbox One was still struggling to find its footing back then, and forcing players to stream 20-minute PV episodes between chapters just killed the pacing for a lot of people. It completely underperformed commercially, which is a massive bummer because the actual game part of this package is really incredible. The setup involves this time travel experiment gone totally wrong, causing time itself to start fracturing and breaking down. You play as Jack Joyce, played by Sean Ashmore, and suddenly you are equipped with all these crazy time manipulation powers. And let me tell you, the combat is where this game absolutely shines. Remedy just knows how to make shooting feel incredibly satisfying. You aren't just sitting back hiding behind cover, you are actively rushing enemies using a time dash, freezing them in these localized time bubbles and pumping a dozen bullets into the bubble so they all hit at the exact same time when the freeze drops. You get a time shield, you can blast enemies with time ripples, and the visual effects are absolutely mind-blowing. When time stutters and the whole environment freezes with debris just hanging in the air and the lighting completely distorting around you, it looks gorgeous even by today's standards. The cast is totally stacked too. You have Lance Reddick and Aidan Gillen turning in fantastic performances as the villains, and they bring a lot of weight to the story. And honestly, even though the live action episodes got a lot of hate, they are actually pretty fun if you treat them like a cheesy, big-budget sci-fi show. The choices you make in the game actually shift scenes in the episodes, which is a really neat concept, even if the execution was a little clunky and the file sizes were massive. It definitely demands a bit of patience with the heavy story focus and the live-action interruptions, but if you want a polished, linear, third-person shooter with totally wild supernatural powers and a really engaging sci-fi narrative, Quantum Break is just a remarkably solid, good-ass video game. It got completely overshadowed by its own weird television gimmick, but anyone who loves that classic Remedy studio weirdness absolutely needs to give it a shot. The Last Guardian. Look, there are some games that you play and you can just feel the absolute agony and passion that went into making them. The Last Guardian is 100% one of those games. If you were paying attention to gaming news back in the day, you already know the insane history here. The developers behind Shadow of the Colossus announced this thing for the PlayStation 3 way back in 2009. People lost their absolute minds, and then it just vanished. It was trapped in development hell for almost a decade, jumping hardware generations, until Sony finally pushed it out the door on the PS4 in 2016. Usually when a game stews in the oven for that long, it comes out as a complete unplayable disaster, but what we actually got was this beautifully flawed, incredibly emotional journey. The whole hook of the game is your relationship with Trico. You're playing as this little kid trying to escape a massive, crumbling ruin, and your only only way out is working with this giant, terrifying, feathered dog bird monster. And the developers did something really crazy here. They didn't just program Trico to be a standard video game companion that instantly does whatever you command. They programmed him to act like a real, stubborn, wild animal. Sometimes you point at a jump and he does it perfectly. Other times he gets distracted, or he's too scared to move past a puzzle. Or you have to literally climb on his back and pet his feathers to calm him down after a fight. The camera can definitely get stuck on walls, the kid controls like a tank sometimes, and the frame rate chugged pretty hard on the base PS4. It has a lot of that classic PS2 era jank, but man, the payoff is so worth it. The bond you build with Trico feels really earned, and the ending will absolutely ruin you. But all that development time basically sealed its fate commercially. When a game takes 9 years to make, the publisher needs it to move an absurd amount of copies just to break even, and The Last Guardian just didn't do that. It sold okay for a niche puzzle platformer, but it was supposed to be a massive system seller. By the time it actually dropped in late 2016, the gaming landscape had totally shifted. It was competing for attention in a holiday window packed with massive mainstream heavyweights. A lot of players picked it up, got incredibly frustrated when Trico didn't immediately listen to a command, complained about the controls on Twitter, and just bounced off it. It was widely considered a commercial disappointment for Sony. Honestly, it bums me out because we are probably never getting a major publisher to write a blank check for an artsy experimental game like this ever again. We just have to appreciate the fact that it actually exists. Days Gone.
We don't have hope.
So Days Gone came out, and people kind of trashed it. Not all of them, but a lot of game reviewers didn't really show it love. Some said it was boring, some said it was buggy, others didn't like the main dude, Deacon. And yeah, maybe the launch was a little rough with some glitches here and there, but man, this game did not deserve all that hate, because if you actually sit down and play it, like really give it time, you'll see it's actually kinda amazing. So you're this biker guy named Deacon St. John. He's not trying to save the whole world or be some big hero, he's just trying to find out if his wife's still alive after the world went to hell. There's zombies everywhere, but they call them freakers here, and these things aren't slow and dumb, they're fast, they scream, and they hunt you in big groups. Sometimes you'll be riding your bike, and a whole freaking horde comes after you. I mean, like 100 of them, gameplays get sweaty real fast. But the game isn't just about killing freakers. There's a whole story going on. It's about love, loss, loyalty, and just staying human in a messed up world. Deacon's not a perfect guy, but he feels real. You can tell he's hurting, but still trying to keep moving. Some of the scenes hit pretty hard, especially later in the story. It goes from just another zombie game to something way more personal. Now, yeah, some missions are a bit slow in the first few hours, not everything clicks right away, but that's kind of the point. The game wants you to live in this world a little. Ride your bike, help camps, do jobs, fix stuff, survive. And speaking of the bike, it's not just a thing you hop on and go. You gotta take care of it. You need gas, you need to repair it. It makes the whole thing feel more real, like you're out there actually surviving. The world in Days Gone is big, but not bloated. You get forests, snowy mountains, rainstorms, creepy abandoned towns, and it all looks good, like really good. The sound design is on point too. You hear freakers in the distance or wolves creeping nearby, and it keeps you on edge the whole time. And don't even get me started on the horde battles. These are straight up chaos. You're throwing Molotovs, placing traps, running like crazy, trying to stay alive. It feels scary, but in a fun way. Every horde fight is like a little puzzle mixed with full-on panic mode. It's honestly kind of wild how this game got pushed to the side. Like, yeah, it ain't perfect, but what game is? It's got heart, it's got style, and it's one of those games that gets better the longer you stick with it. It didn't blow up like other PlayStation exclusives, but that doesn't mean it's trash. It's one of those hidden gems that hits hard once you really dig into it. If you never give it a shot, now's the time. Days Gone is way more than people said. It's not just a zombie game, it's a full ride through a broken world with one of the most underrated stories out there.
What does it matter if everyone else is dead?
Mad Max. I have a real soft spot for games that completely nail their atmosphere. You know the kind I mean. Games where you just stand still, pan the camera around, and totally buy into the world the developers built. And that is exactly what happened when I fired up Mad Max. I originally played this back when it dropped, and going back to it recently, I was honestly kinda shocked by how hard it still hits. I just finished another full playthrough, clearing out camps and building up my ride, and man, I want to talk about it. Because on this channel, I try and just really talk about stuff I really enjoy, and this is just a remarkably solid, good-ass game. The setup is pretty straightforward. You play as Max, you lose your iconic interceptor in the very beginning, and you team up with this weird hunchbacked mechanic named Chumbucket to build the ultimate wasteland vehicle called the Magnum Opus. The entire game revolves around this car. Avalanche Studios handled the development, and while they apparently found making a vehicular combat game challenging at first, they completely nailed the final product. The driving and the car combat are easily the massive highlights here. You are slamming into war parties, firing harpoons to rip the wheels off enemy vehicles, and boosting through the sand. It feels heavy, loud, and incredibly violent, and when you are forced out of the car, the hand-to-hand combat is this brutal, bone-crunching brawler system. It has that familiar rhythm of countering and striking, but every single punch Max throws looks like it really hurts. You are gathering scrap to upgrade your knuckles, your jacket, and most importantly, bolting massive spikes and V8 engines onto your car to survive. But despite all of this super satisfying gameplay, Mad Max completely underperformed commercially. It is honestly one of those classic cases of catastrophic release timing. The game launched on September 1, 2015. If that date sounds familiar to you, it is because it is the exact same day Metal Gear Solid: The Phantom Pain came out. Going up against one of the most anticipated games of that entire generation was practically a death sentence for sales. The former CEO of Avalanche Studios even specifically pointed to launching on that same day as the reason the game's performance was so underwhelming. On top of that, it came out several months after the Mad Max Fury Road movie hit theaters. Because of that awkward gap, it missed out on coasting on the massive film hype, and a lot of the casual audience just assumed it was some cheap, rushed movie tie-in game, which it absolutely was not. Yes, the quest design can get repetitive. You're doing a lot of the same camp clearing and scrap collecting over and over again, and critics definitely docked points for the story and mission structure, but the core loop is so buttery smooth that it just feels really fun to play. The environment and the graphics still hold up incredibly well, and wandering that desolate wasteland has this crazy lonely vibe that fits the character perfectly. Avalanche poured a ton of love into the vehicular carnage, and it shows. If you like the satisfaction of building something from a rusty frame into an absolute monster of a machine, you owe it to yourself to check this one out. Alien Isolation. Okay, so Alien Isolation is one of those games that a lot of folks didn't finish or didn't even try. Some people said it was too slow or too scary, and yeah, sure, it is scary, but man, this game is something special. It flopped kind of hard when it came out, but now it's a masterpiece, straight up. So here's the deal. You play as this woman named Amanda Ripley. She's the daughter of Ellen Ripley from the old Alien movies. You go to this space station called Sevastopol trying to find out what happened to your mom, but of course nothing goes as planned. There's this alien on board, not just any alien, the big scary one with the shiny head and the creepy mouth inside a mouth thing, and it is hunting you the whole game. Here's what makes Alien Isolation different. You're not some big action hero, you don't have a ton of guns, you don't even get to fight the alien most of the time. You gotta hide, sneak, stay quiet, you're crawling under tables, hiding in lockers, trying not to breathe too loud. That alien is smart too. It hears you, smells you, and it learns. If you hide in the same place too often, it'll figure it out. It's like you're really being hunted, and that makes everything way more intense. The space station looks amazing too. It's got this old school sci-fi vibe, like 1970s future style. Blinking lights, clunky computers, heavy doors, all of it feels real. It feels like you're inside one of those classic movies. The sound design is crazy too. Every little beep or hiss makes you jump. Sometimes you'll hear the alien crawling through the vents above you and just freeze in place, scared to move. The story is pretty solid too. It keeps you moving and gives you just enough hope to keep going even when things feel hopeless. You meet other people, try to survive and uncover what happened on the station, and it's not just the alien, there are creepy androids too. They walk real slow and talk in this weird, calm voice, but if they grab you, you're done for. So you're not just hiding from one thing, it's a whole mess of danger. But yeah, when the game dropped, a lot of people didn't finish it. They said it was too long or too hard. Some folks just gave up. So it didn't sell great, it didn't get the hype it really deserved. But here's the truth. If you stick with it, it becomes one of the most unforgettable horror games ever made. It's not just about jump scares, it's about tension, fear, that feeling in your gut where you don't know if you're gonna make it. The game nails that feeling. And now, years later, more and more people are going back and calling it a classic. Because that's what it is, a quiet, scary, beautiful masterpiece. Singularity. Honestly, I think Singularity just came out at the worst possible time. Back then, if you were an FPS and you weren't Call of Duty, Battlefield, Halo, or Bioshock level huge, people kind of ignored you automatically. And from screenshots alone, Singularity looked like another generic gray shooter from 2010. But then you actually play it and realize the game is doing way cooler stuff than most shooters around it. Like, the time manipulation mechanics alone make it memorable. There's a part early on where an entire room shifts between timelines right in front of you, and suddenly this abandoned, wrecked facility becomes this fully operational Soviet lab, with people running around before everything goes to hell again. Stuff like that sticks with you. And I always liked how committed the atmosphere was too. The island feels creepy the entire game. Not full horror game scary, but there's constantly this weird tension where everything feels unstable. Mutants jumping at you, old recordings, Soviet experiments gone wrong, reality breaking apart around you. It's got a little Bioshock energy to it, a little fear energy too. Even the weapons feel good in that old school FPS way where every gun had its own identity. The Seeker rifle especially is sick because you literally guide bullets manually through the air. That's the kind of dumb, fun, experimental stuff shooters barely do anymore. The game definitely has rough spots though. Enemy AI gets goofy sometimes, the story kind of loses itself near the end, and some sections drag a bit. But overall, it's one of those games where you can clearly feel the developers trying to make something memorable instead of just cloning whatever was popular at the time. And that's probably why people still talk about it now more than a lot of shooters that actually sold better back then. Sleeping dogs. You ever play a game and immediately feel like it should have been way bigger than it actually was? Like, not cult classic bigger, I mean really mainstream gigantic. That's basically Sleeping Dogs in a nutshell, because on paper, this thing sounds almost impossible to mess up. Open world crime game set in Hong Kong, undercover cop story, martial arts combat inspired by old school action movies, street racing, karaoke, gambling, brutal environmental takedowns, really good voice acting, and honestly one of the better crime game stories of that entire console generation. And somehow, this thing came and went without becoming the monster franchise it probably should have been. And what sucks is the game absolutely has that you can tell people cared energy all over it. The first thing that hits you is the setting. Hong Kong in this game feels different from the usual open world cities everybody copies from Grand Theft Auto 5 or older GTA stuff. The streets are packed, signs glowing everywhere, wet pavement reflecting neon lights at night, cramped markets, tiny alleyways, food stands, people yelling at each other, traffic constantly squeezing through tight roads. It has personality. The city feels dense instead of just huge for the sake of being huge. And then there's Wei Shen, who honestly carries the whole game. A lot of open world protagonists from that era were trying way too hard to be edgy or sarcastic all the time. Wei actually feels believable because he's constantly getting pulled apart mentally. He's an undercover cop getting deeper into the triads, and the game really leans into that tension. There are moments where he feels loyal to both sides, and moments where he clearly doesn't even know who he is anymore. The story gets surprisingly heavy later on too. Some deaths in this game really hit harder than people expect. And man, the combat, that's the thing everybody remembers. Instead of being another cover shooter clone like half the industry was back then, this game said, nah, let's make people punch dudes in the throat. The hand-to-hand combat is basically this really satisfying mix of Batman Arkham City style counters mixed with old martial arts movie choreography. Fights feel physical. Wei slams people into air conditioners, throws them into phone booths, shoves their faces onto spinning fans, tosses them into dumpsters. Every environment becomes a weapon, and the animations sell everything. That's why the combat still feels good today. Hits land hard. You feel the weight behind punches. Crowds react. Enemies stumble around. Some dudes panic when they realize they're losing. There's this raw street fight energy to it that a lot of modern open world games weirdly still don't have. Even driving around feels underrated. Cars have this arcadey slide to them that fits the city perfectly. Motorcycles especially are ridiculously fun because Hong Kong's streets are narrow and chaotic, so weaving through traffic actually feels intense. The game understands pacing too. One second you're in a brutal fistfight in a fish market, next second you're singing karaoke horribly, then suddenly doing a police bust, then eating pork buns from a street vendor. And dude, the atmosphere? Crazy underrated. At night especially, the game becomes kinda hypnotic. Rain pouring down, synth-heavy soundtrack, neon signs everywhere, traffic noise echoing through streets. It has this gritty crime thriller vibe that feels halfway between a Hong Kong cop movie and a late-night PS3 era comfort game. You can just drive around for like an hour doing absolutely nothing important and still enjoy yourself. But I think part of why it didn't explode commercially is timing. The game launched during that era where every publisher wanted their own massive open world franchise. The competition was brutal. Also, a lot of people sadly looked at it as Asian GTA clone without actually playing it, which completely undersells what made it special. Because honestly, it doesn't even feel that much like GTA once you're actually in it. It's way more focused, way more melee driven, and honestly, more personal. And another thing, this game had no business looking as good as it did back then. The definitive edition still holds up pretty well too. Character faces, lighting, the city density, weather effects, you can tell the developers squeezed everything they could out of that hardware. What really hurts though is knowing the studio got shut down, because United Front Games absolutely had something here. Sleeping Dogs felt like the start of a bigger franchise. You can imagine sequels refining the shooting, expanding the combat system, making investigations deeper, maybe pushing the undercover cop angle even harder. Instead, it became one of those games people randomly rediscover years later and go, wait, this didn't sell well? Yeah, somehow it didn't, and honestly, that still feels wrong. System Shock 2. This one is legendary. Like, when we talk about good games that didn't sell well, this is almost the poster child for that entire conversation. It came out back in 1999, which was just a completely stacked year for games, and it was a massive critical darling. Reviews at the time were screaming about how amazing and groundbreaking it was, but almost nobody actually bought it. It sold something like 100,000 copies early on, which even back then was considered a huge commercial failure. It straight up contributed to Looking Glass Studios going bankrupt shortly after. And the crazy part is, without System Shock 2, the modern gaming landscape would look completely different. We wouldn't have BioShock, we wouldn't have Arcane doing Dishonored or Prey. It is essentially the granddaddy of the modern immersive sim. The setup is pretty intense. You wake up from cryosleep on this massive starship called the Von Braun, and you immediately realize everything has gone completely to hell. There's blood everywhere, the crew is either dead or mutated by this weird alien biomass called the Many, and I gotta tell you, the atmosphere is just deeply, deeply unsettling. The audio design does a massive amount of heavy lifting here. You're creeping down these cold, empty metal corridors, and you constantly hear these horrible, desperate moans from the infected crew members. They are literally begging you to kill them and apologizing while they sprint at you with the lead pipe. It's rough. And then there's Shodan. I really don't want to spoil too much, even though the game is decades old, but Shodan is easily one of the greatest video game villains of all time. She's this rogue AI who speaks with this glitchy, stuttering, unbelievably arrogant voice, constantly looking down on you like you're an insect. Having her in your ear just makes the whole trek through the ship feel so incredibly oppressive. The gameplay itself is definitely a little janky by today's standards. It takes a minute to get used to the UI and the controls, but once it clicks, it really clicks. It's this deep mix of a first-person shooter, survival horror, and a heavy RPG. You're dealing with a grid-based inventory, basically playing Tetris with your ammo and health hypos. Your weapons actually degrade and they will constantly jam on you right in the middle of a frantic fight. It makes you feel so desperate and vulnerable. You're constantly scrounging for nanites to upgrade your skills, and the game gives you a lot of freedom, like do you want to be a hacker and bypass all the security? Do you want to dump your points into heavy exotic weapons? Or do you want to mess around with weird alien psionic abilities? You tackle problems your own way, and that level of freedom is something I always look for. It's definitely for a certain type of player, especially nowadays. It demands a lot of patience and it doesn't hold your hand at all. But if you like the satisfaction of outsmarting a game that actively hates you and surviving a truly hostile environment, System Shock 2 is just an incredibly good-ass game. It is a total tragedy that it didn't do numbers back in the day, but anyone who loves digging into gaming history absolutely needs to play it. Enslaved: Odyssey to the West, there's something kinda sad about this game, because this is one of those games that came out during an era where publishers were obsessed with chasing giant blockbuster numbers, and if a game didn't become the next mega franchise immediately, people treated it like a failure. Meanwhile, this thing was sitting there doing a lot of stuff really well years before people started praising cinematic, character-driven action games again. And the crazy part is, if you play it now, you can actually see pieces of modern PlayStation-style storytelling games inside it. Like, this game weirdly feels ahead of its time in certain ways. The setup alone is strong. Post-apocalyptic Earth, except not the usual gray-brown nuclear wasteland everybody was doing back then. Nature has completely reclaimed the world. Cities are covered in massive overgrown vegetation, vines crawling over skyscrapers, sunlight cutting through broken buildings, robots wandering around ancient ruins like ghosts. It has this beautiful, lonely atmosphere that instantly separates it from all the generic end-of-the-world games from that generation.
Can't sneak past them. I'll get across and draw their attention.
And visually, dude, this game still has moments that look awesome. You'll climb to the top of some collapsed structure and see entire cities buried under greenery while these giant ruined machines sit in the distance, and it creates this weird mix of peaceful and creepy at the same time. The art direction carries hard. You can tell the developers had a very specific vision instead of just trying to copy whatever was popular. But the real reason people who love this game really love it is the relationship between Monkey and Trip. That's the whole thing. Monkey, voiced by Andy Serkis, starts off as this rough, angry survivor who honestly just wants to be left alone. Then Trip basically enslaves him using this headband device that can literally kill him if he disobeys her. Which sounds insane, and it is, but what makes the story work is how their relationship slowly evolves from distrust into genuine dependence and understanding, and Andy Serkis absolutely carries scenes here. Before performance capture storytelling became standard everywhere, this game was already trying really hard to make conversations feel natural and emotional. Monkey feels human because Serkis gives him frustration, sarcasm, exhaustion, awkwardness. He's not some clean superhero dude, he's messy. Trip's great too because she's not written like generic strong female character dialogue from that era where everybody sounded weirdly robotic and smug all the time. She's vulnerable, smart, scared sometimes, hopeful other times. Their chemistry feels believable because they annoy each other constantly. And honestly, the game gets surprisingly emotional later on, especially once you start understanding the world and what happened to humanity.
I'm just saying, when my father hears about all you've done for me, I know he'll offer you a home.
Gameplay-wise, it's this mix of platforming, light combat, traversal, and cinematic set pieces. You can definitely feel the DNA of older action-adventure games in it. Climbing sections are very controlled and cinematic, almost like a prototype version of stuff you'd later see refined in games like Uncharted 2 Among Thieves, or even modern God of War pacing structures. Now, to be fair, the combat isn't revolutionary, it's probably the weakest part overall. It's functional, satisfying enough, sometimes repetitive. You've got staff attacks, crowd control stuff, ranged options, enemy robots with different behaviors. It works, but the gameplay itself was never really the main reason people remember Enslaved. It's the journey. It's the feeling of traveling across this broken world with these characters while the soundtrack kicks in and the game suddenly slows down for quiet moments. There's this sincerity to it that's hard to explain. The game isn't trying to be ironic or constantly funny or overly edgy. It just wants to tell a human story inside a weird sci-fi world. Mirror's Edge. Mirror's Edge didn't try to be like everything else. No guns blazing, no big open world with side quests everywhere, just you, rooftops, and movement. This game was all about flow, parkour in first person, which almost no one had done before. You play as Faith, a runner in a clean, cold future city where everything looks perfect, but underneath it all, it's rotten. The vibe is super unique. White buildings, pops of red, clear blue skies. It doesn't look like other games. It feels fresh, even today. And then there's the way it plays. You're not just pressing a button to jump. You're timing it, grabbing ledges, rolling when you land, sprinting across pipes, crashing through windows. When it clicks, it's like dancing. You get in the zone and just move. No game feels quite like it. But here's the thing, Mirror's Edge didn't do so hot when it came out. It wasn't some big hit. People didn't know what to do with it. A lot of folks got frustrated, fell off rooftops too many times, or just didn't vibe with the no gun, no hand-holding style. So yeah, it flopped. EA didn't even rush to make a sequel. Took years before they even touched it again. Still, there's something kinda pure about this game. It's short, it's focused, no filler. You're running, jumping, escaping. That's it. The music's chill, the world is cold and quiet, and the story's simple but interesting. You're just this one person up against a system that wants to crush you. It's not loud about it, it just is. A lot of games now borrow pieces of what Mirror's Edge did back then, the parkour, the movement first design, but this one still stands out. It had guts. It didn't chase trends, it tried something new, and even though it stumbled a bit, it made history in its own way. Okami. You ever see something so beautiful that you wonder why nobody talks about it? That's Okami. This game dropped back in the PS2 days, and when it did, barely anyone picked it up. It flopped hard, just completely flew under the radar. But man, if there was ever a game that deserved better, it's this one. First off, yeah, the art. This thing doesn't look like any other game. It's not trying to be realistic. It's like you're playing inside a moving painting. Everything's hand-drawn and full of brush strokes and flowing lines. It's inspired by old Japanese art, and it looks gorgeous. Even today, it holds up. You could boot it up right now and it would still feel fresh. You play as a white wolf named Amaterasu. She's actually a sun goddess, but the game never gets all preachy or confusing about it. You're just this quiet, magical wolf going around fixing the world. There's this evil darkness spreading, and your job is to bring life and color back to the land. Wherever you go, trees bloom, rivers flow again, the sky clears up. It's peaceful and satisfying and kind of magical. And the gameplay? It's like a mix of Zelda and something totally its own. You explore, fight monsters, solve puzzles, talk to weird little characters, and do a lot of drawing. Yeah, that's the big thing, the celestial brush. You pause the game and draw symbols right on the screen to make stuff happen. A circle brings the sun back, a slash cuts enemies or opens doors. It's weird at first, but once it clicks, it feels awesome. You're not just pressing buttons, you're painting your way through the story. The game's long, too. Not bloated, but full of stuff to do. Different regions, dungeons, bosses, side quests. The characters are goofy and fun, but the story also has some really sweet and emotional moments. And the music, don't even get me started. It's peaceful and powerful all at once. Total vibe. But here's the sad part. When it launched, it didn't sell. Not even close. Probably because people didn't know what to make of it. Maybe it looked too artsy. Maybe it was just bad timing. Even the folks who did buy it had to deal with a dumb box art mistake where they forgot to put the main character on the cover. Like, how do you mess that up? Over the years though, Okami got love. It got re-released on newer consoles. People started talking about it more. It became one of those cult classic games, the kind that didn't blow up but stuck with you forever if you played it. Shadow of the Tomb Raider. So this is the third game in the reboot trilogy. You had Tomb Raider in 2013, then Rise of the Tomb Raider, and finally this one, Shadow of the Tomb Raider. But here's the thing, this one didn't really hit the same for a lot of people. Some said the story was too slow, Lara felt a little off, and the game tried to be way too serious. And yeah, I get that. The tone is darker, Lara's kind of cold and quiet, and the story's all about ancient stuff, guilt, death, and the end of the world. Not exactly popcorn fun vibes. But if you can look past that, man, there's a lot to love here. First off, the tombs. The actual tombs in Shadow of the Tomb Raider are the best in the whole series, no contest. These things are big, creepy, dangerous, and they actually feel like places someone shouldn't be going into. There's traps, puzzles, deep underground caverns, lost temples. It finally feels like real tomb raiding, not just some side activity like in past games. And they look beautiful. The lighting, the reflections, the way vines hang off broken statues, it all looks so damn good. Now, yeah, the combat wasn't everybody's favorite. There's less of it, and it tries to make you sneak more. Some players didn't vibe with that. And Lara's story this time feels kind of heavy. She's dealing with the fact that she accidentally triggered a literal apocalypse. Not exactly happy-go-lucky adventuring here, but honestly, that darker tone gives it some weight. It's like she's really becoming the hardened Tomb Raider she's meant to be. The sad part is, this game got kind of brushed off. Like, after how big Rise of the Tomb Raider was, people barely talked about Shadow, and it didn't sell as much, it didn't get the hype, and some folks still call it the weakest in the trilogy, but nah man, it's just different, slower, more thoughtful, and way more about exploring than action. And in terms of actual tomb raiding, it absolutely nails it. So yeah, Shadow of the Tomb Raider might not be everyone's favorite, but it's got some of the best environments, the coolest tombs, and a Lara who's finally starting to feel like the legend she's supposed to be. Not a flop, but definitely underrated.
Only one chance.
Rage 2. So Rage 2 is one of those games where you look at it and go, dang, this looks sick. Big explosions, pink paint everywhere, chunky sci-fi guns, and a main character that can do superpower style moves like ground slams and air dashes. The trailers made it look like Doom met Mad Max with a shot of crazy. And to be fair, the moment-to-moment gunplay, it does feel awesome. Shooting in this game is smooth as butter. The guns hit hard, enemies go flying, and once you start unlocking your powers, you feel like a freaking superhero in the apocalypse. There's a shotgun that literally blows people across the map. There's a power punch that launches dudes into the sky. It's fun, like really fun for a bit. But the problem? The world around that fun kinda empty. It's an open world game, but the world feels weirdly lifeless. You're driving around this big dusty map and half the time you're like, wait, where is everybody? There's a few enemy camps here and there and some races or missions, but nothing really pulls you in. There's not much story to care about either. You're just some ranger dude or lady trying to stop a bad guy who shows up for like 2 minutes total, and then boom, that's kinda it. But hey, if you just want to blow stuff up and don't care about story or deep world building, this game totally scratches that itch. The driving's alright, the shooting's top tier, and the colors? Oh man, it's like someone spilled neon paint all over the apocalypse. Very stylish, very loud. So yeah, Rage 2 is one of those games that starts strong, gives you some cool toys to play with, but then runs out of steam real fast. It had potential, it just needed more heart, or at least more interesting stuff to do between the shootouts. Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning. Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning is one of those games where you can literally feel the ambition oozing out of it, but it just got lost in the shuffle. Like, this thing had the makings of a major RPG franchise. Big names behind it too. R.A. Salvatore, famous fantasy author, handled the world building. Todd McFarlane did the art style, and Ken Rolston, lead designer of Elder Scrolls Oblivion, worked on the game systems. So yeah, it wasn't some no-name indie project. They wanted this to be a universe. The game itself it's a big open world fantasy RPG with fast, flashy action combat, which was super rare for the genre at the time. You could actually dodge, roll, string together combos, block, use spells mid-fight. It felt tight and fun, like a proper action game, not just press X to swing swords slowly. And the world? It's huge. Like MMO huge. Tons of regions, different biomes, races, and side quests everywhere. There's lore up the wazoo. Salvatore basically wrote like 10,000 years of in-game history, and you can tell this was built as a setup for a long-running series. The story itself is about you being a fateless one, someone who doesn't have a destiny, and that concept actually ties into the gameplay. You can respec your character at any time, change classes, and become whatever you want. Warrior today? Cool. Mage tomorrow? Also fine. It's super flexible and lets you experiment a lot. But here's where things went sideways. Even though the combat slapped and the world was massive, the game didn't get the love it deserved. It launched in early 2012, kind of close to Skyrim, and even though they were different games, people just kept comparing them. Amalur had this bright, colorful, almost World of Warcraft vibe, while Skyrim was all gritty and grounded, and a lot of folks just didn't give Amalur a fair shot. Some thought the writing was too wordy, others said the open world was empty, which is a stretch, honestly, because it had a ton of content, but yeah, it didn't have the hyper polish that the big boys did. Also, the studio behind it, 38 Studios, went bankrupt not long after release. Total disaster. There was a huge legal and financial mess, and the game just got kinda forgotten. No sequels, no big expansions, just one DLC, and then silence. Which sucks because this game could have been a franchise, like a proper trilogy, or even an MMO. Eventually, THQ Nordic bought the rights and dropped a remaster in 2020, and it's cool that they're trying to keep it alive, but still, Amalur deserved more. It had heart, fun combat, deep customization, and a huge world. Was it perfect? Nah, the quest design was kinda samey, the world lacked the dynamic feeling of something like Witcher 3, and the story pacing was uneven. But underneath that, there's a damn good RPG that just didn't get its shot. Dishonored 2. I am a massive sucker for immersive sims. Games that just drop you into a meticulously crafted sandbox and say, figure it out however you want. And when it comes to that specific genre, Arcane Studios is basically royalty. I replayed Dishonored 2 recently, and man, I was just constantly shaking my head at how insanely talented that team is. The hook this time around is that you can play through the entire game as either the returning protagonist, Corvo Attano, or an older, extremely lethal Emily Caldwin. They both have completely different sets of supernatural powers, which makes the replay value absolutely off the charts. You can ghost through a level without touching a single guard, or you can turn into a literal shadow monster and rip the entire map apart. But the real star of the show here is the level design. It is honestly some of the best I have ever seen in my entire life. There is one mission called the Clockwork Mansion, where the entire house physically shifts and transforms around you when you pull levers. You can actually slip behind the walls and navigate the gears while the rooms are rearranging. Then, a few hours later, they throw you into a level called A Crack in the Slab, where you are literally holding a timepiece that lets you look into the past, and you are seamlessly jumping back and forth between two different time periods to bypass locked doors and guards. It is completely mind-blowing that a video game can even function like that without crashing. But for whatever reason, the mainstream gaming audience just totally ignored it. Dishonored 2 launched in November 2016, and the physical sales in the UK were down something like 40% compared to the original game. That is a massive, terrifying drop for a AAA sequel. Part of the blame definitely falls on the release window. Late 2016 was absolutely packed with heavy hitters, and immersive sims are already a pretty tough sell for casual audiences who just want to run and gun after a long day at work. On top top of that, Bethesda made this wildly controversial decision right before launch to stop sending out early review copies to the press. That meant there were 0 reviews on day 1, completely killing any natural hype or momentum the game could have built. And to make matters worse, the PC port was a technical disaster at launch. People were dealing with massive frame drops, stuttering, and hard crashes, which meant the Steam reviews were instantly slammed with negativity. It took months of patches to finally smooth things out, but by then, the damage was completely done. It is honestly a tragedy, because underneath all that corporate mishandling and launch jank is an absolute masterpiece of game design. If you skipped this one because of the bad buzz back in 2016, you are seriously missing out on a legendary ride. Alan Wake 2, technically the game sold decent eventually, but for the budget, the production value, the reviews, and just how much people talked about it online, you'd expect this thing to have exploded way harder commercially right away. Because dude, this game is wildly confident in itself. Most modern AAA games are terrified of confusing players for even 5 seconds. Alan Wake 2 almost does the opposite. It throws you into this weird, layered, psychological horror story full of live-action footage, reality shifting around you, unreliable narration, creepy New York talk show energy, murder investigations, musical sequences, supernatural darkness monsters, and somehow it all still feels surprisingly coherent once you settle into its rhythm. And the biggest reason it works is atmosphere. The atmosphere in this game is ridiculous. Bright Falls feels damp and uncomfortable in the best way possible. Wet forests, flickering flashlight beams, distant noises in the woods, tiny rural buildings that feel weirdly real. Then you switch over to Alan's sections in the dark place, and suddenly the game becomes this surreal nightmare version of New York, where reality rewrites itself constantly. That contrast carries the whole experience. Saga Anderson's side feels grounded and investigative, while Alan's side feels like you're trapped inside a collapsing horror manuscript. And honestly, Remedy absolutely cooked with the visual design here. Some scenes look straight up unreal. The lighting alone is nuts. Flashlights cutting through fog, neon signs reflecting off wet streets, shadows moving around environments. This is one of those games where you stop walking for a second just to look around like an idiot. But what surprised me most is how restrained the game actually is. People hear survival horror and expect non-stop screaming and jump scares every 10 seconds. Alan Wake 2 is way slower and moodier than that. It takes its time. Sometimes you're just walking through a forest listening to branches crack around you. Sometimes you're sitting there trying to piece together clues in Saga's mind-placed detective board thing. Sometimes the game gets almost dreamlike, and then suddenly it becomes terrifying out of nowhere.
There's something...
The sound design does a lot of heavy lifting too. Whispering voices, distorted echoes, random sounds in the distance, enemies chanting lines at you while slowly approaching through darkness. Headphones in this game are dangerous, man. And the craziest thing, Remedy somehow made exposition-heavy weirdness entertaining. Normally, if a game starts throwing around stories becoming reality meta-narrative stuff, my eyes glaze over instantly. But here, the performances sell it. Sam Lake especially deserves credit, because his fingerprints are all over this thing. The game has that same Remedy-style awkward, surreal humor mixed with genuine creepiness. One second you're uncomfortable, next second there's some bizarre commercial or musical sequence that somehow works perfectly. And dude, that musical chapter, that's the kind of thing most AAA studios would never even attempt, because somebody in a boardroom would call it too weird. Meanwhile, Alan Wake 2 fully commits to it, and it becomes one of the most memorable moments in gaming last year. Gameplay-wise, I also think people undersell how good the survival horror mechanics feel. The flashlight system still works great because enemies feel threatening when darkness shields them. Ammo stays limited enough to keep tension alive. Exploration rewards you constantly. And unlike a lot of bloated modern games, this one actually respects pacing. Now, to be fair, I totally understand why this game didn't become instant mega mainstream GTA level successful either. It's weird, like really weird. You kind of need patience for it. You need to pay attention. The story intentionally messes with your head. There are long stretches focused on mood and investigation instead of action. And if somebody just wants a straightforward shooter, this game probably loses them fast. Plus, it launched in a ridiculously crowded period. 2023 was stacked with massive releases already eating everybody's time and money. But man, this feels like one of those games people are going to keep revisiting years later, because there just aren't many AAA studios making stuff this specific anymore. Most publishers smooth every rough edge off their games trying to appeal to everybody. Alan Wake 2 feels handcrafted by comparison. Messy in places, indulgent sometimes, but memorable constantly.
In the lake house, all agents converge on the facility now.
Rise, Son of Rome. Man, Rise Son of Rome is one of those games that people made fun of when it came out, like for real. Folks said it was just a tech demo, just something shiny to show off the Xbox One's graphics. And yeah, it does look amazing. Even today, it still looks like a game from the future. The armor, the blood, the giant battles, all of it looks super real. But you know what? This game was way more than just pretty graphics. It had heart. Play as this Roman soldier named Marius. His story starts off simple. He's trying to protect his family, fight for Rome, do the whole honor thing. But then things go really bad. His family gets murdered, the empire's falling apart, and everything turns into this big, crazy revenge story. You're marching through burning cities, fighting barbarians, leading armies, and shouting commands. It feels big and epic, like you're in a Hollywood movie. The gameplay is pretty simple. You fight with a sword and shield, and you do these cool finishing moves in slow motion. Some people said it was too repetitive, but honestly it feels satisfying. Like, it's just fun to swing a sword and slam enemies with your shield. You don't always need 100 buttons or complex systems. Sometimes it's nice to just press a few buttons and feel like a badass Roman warrior. But yeah, when it came out, it didn't do well. A lot of people skipped it or just didn't take it seriously. Critics were harsh, said it was shallow. But the thing is, Reese wasn't trying to be the deepest game ever. It was just trying to give you a cool story, awesome combat, and a world that feels huge and beautiful. And it nailed that. Now, years later, more and more people are going back to it and saying, yo, this was actually fire. It's one of those games that got laughed at for no reason. If you just sit down and play it without expecting it to change your life, you'll probably have a blast. It's short, fun, looks insane, and makes you feel like a gladiator.